Okay, well, welcome everybody to this afternoon session. It's good to see a number of people here. The group is growing, and that can only be good things for everybody. The more of us, the better. The more discussion, the more we learn from each other, the more different views we have. Then that's better for everybody's learning. Okay, so our agenda for this evening is fairly basic. It's just some introductions. We've got some new people here today, so we can all introduce ourselves. Then just a recap on expectations, the provisional schedule, the preparation that we need to do each week for the session so that we can all get the maximum out of it. Then we'll talk a little bit about the self-assessment. We had asked everyone just to go and do that 50-question self-assessment on the CISA site. Then we'll go through a chapter overview. So what's chapter 1 all about? Hopefully everybody's read it, has come up with some areas that they struggled a little bit on or have some questions about it. Then we can talk about any challenges that you've had in those chapters. If you've done some of the sample questions, we can go through those questions, see where you've got it right, where you've got it wrong, try and explain some items that need to be explained, and then talk about what we want to do for next week. And then that's it. So we'll aim to be finished kind of just 7-ish or so just before. We'll see how it goes. Okay. So I'm your facilitator tonight. I'm Justin, for those who don't know me. I've done a whole lot of things. I'm a director here at ITSec. Previously, I was head of risk security, governance and compliance for Transnet Group. So all the areas I've had practical experience, either doing it at Transnet or auditing it or doing consulting around it in my previous life at Ernst & Young. And now here at ITSec again doing similar kinds of things. Okay, so perhaps everybody can introduce themselves. Perhaps just give us a 10-second overview of how you found the first chapter. And then just tell us what was your most challenging activity of the week, whether it's related to studies or not, doesn't really matter.
Hi guys, my name is Mazwi Moikwa. I am working for Toyota as an IT auditor. Been with Toyota for a year. Previously, I was with the KZN Department of Treasury. Worked there for 3 years. Then I joined Toyota. This week, the challenges that I've had, it's really trying to juggle the going to school, studying, because actually following my studies at DUC, going for BTech in IC. So juggling that, also CISA and work, it's been my huge challenge for this week. I am looking to gain some pointers on how to manage it a bit better from these sessions, and also how to cope with the entire load that I'm faced with. Didn't get a chance to read chapter 1, so just hoping can pick up.
To go through the chapter. Last year when I did the exam in December, so I didn't make it. So hopefully this will be something where I'm going to actually push myself better and study, because I didn't really have much time to go through the questions with work and things. And I'm also doing my final level of econ accounting, furthering my studies, so it's a bit hectic juggling CISA and my undergrad qualifications and stuff. So hopefully I will be pushing harder to go through everything.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Abdul. I'm a chemist by profession, but I do IT auditing. I've been working at ITSec for 6-7 months. Started IT auditing. My challenge for this week is I ate too much junk food. I go to Germany now. I read the first chapter. It's a good introduction. It gives you a good overview, but it also gives you a lot of information about, I would say, all of additional reading that you need to do. So I was going to ask Justin, what is important, what's not too important, and how in depth you need to look at that reading. So I'll forward that question on later in the session.
call, I got like under 50%, 41 something. 21 out of 55.
I got 43%.
Yeah, so
I did it again and then I
So
got 40.
I failed badly in the IT part, chapter 4 and 5, 3 and 4, sorry. So 3, 4 and 5 actually. So looking forward to those sections more than anything.
Yeah, I also feel that acquisitions part
Yeah,
is
it's
a bit difficult.
like the first 2 chapters are okay because we in the audit field, whoever's
Yeah.
in this audit field.
That's the part, because I did a IT qualification, but IT accounting.
Mm.
But that's a part which brought me down in December. Because you have to be competent in all the levels, in all
Yeah,
chapters.
yeah.
Sometimes it's the
So I'm lacking the IT
utilization,
level, IT
Yeah.
side of things now. But let's see. IT.
Bongi Giva from AG. I've just completed 2 years with AG. Previously, I was with Deloitte, but doing completely different things. Thus, IT auditing is still new to me. I've tried to attempt chapter 1, but I mean, several nights I will fall asleep whatsoever. I don't find it very exciting whatsoever. I think the layout of the chapter whatsoever, you're not too sure. I mean, what to grasp, what to leave out. You feel like you feel like there's so much information, and sometimes you don't even see where does it fit in. You really have to read everything, or you need to leave something out. And another challenge was when I complete the chapter, when I'm trying to look at the questions, it's like, I don't know what they're talking about. It could be that it's my interpretation, because sometimes when you select the answer, to me it makes sense. But sometimes when they actually break down the question, when they tell you why that answer is incorrect, for some reason, sometimes it doesn't make sense, or it will only make sense when they actually tell you the answer. So I think I'm still struggling in terms of the way I would answer the questions, even if I understand the content. But when it comes to answering the question based on the content, I think I'm still struggling.
Hopefully we'll through the couple of
It's
weeks
so
that we're together,
frustrating,
get
though.
it sorted out.
Hello, my name's Catherine. I work at Deloitte at Audit. And yeah, I was supposed to write CISA in December, but for lots of reasons I had to defer it. So I studied chapter 1 in November, October-ish. So I just need to read through it. But yeah, I mean, as Bongi said, it's a lot of information. So I did find quite information over because I like to write when I make notes, and in the end,
You just don't know what to
I
write,
can't
what not
do
to
this,
write in
yeah.
terms of notes.
And then I thought like
No, I
I need
can't
to study for
summarize
the year
it.
if I want to write notes. But yeah, so that is my most challenging activity. Time deadline probably this week.
I think it's everybody's
Yeah,
problem.
the usual.
Okay, guys, my name is Shane. I've been with PwC for the last 2 months. I finished a degree in computer science last year. I'm currently not planning to write the CISA this year, but looking for a bit of exposure earlier better for me. I feel my greatest challenge this week was with the self-assessment, the similarity in the answers. They all seem to be very close, and also gaining resources, which is something I'm going to ask question for later. That's it.
Cool. Okay. So if we have a look at the recap of the preparation that we wanted to have done by tonight, the first thing was chapter 1. Try and read the whole chapter. These first few weeks is going to be a little less stressful than the later ones. The chapters are much shorter, so it's easier to get through them, but they're also much more dense in terms of the amount of information you have to absorb on smaller numbers of pages. So that means you have to kind of read it, and you find yourself reading it again and again to try and just get it to sink in and make kind of sense out of it. We spoke last week about trying to break it up into shorter sections. Don't think that just because it's 30 pages, that 30 pages you can normally read in 15 minutes. This 30 pages no can do. You're going to need to read it like a page or two at a time, and then go away, do something else, and then come back and then read the next two and read the next two, just so that you're not suffering from that information overload where by the time you've read 3 pages, you can't remember what was on the first page or even what was in the paragraph before. Okay. Then in terms of making notes, make notes wherever you don't understand something, even if it's just using a pencil, just putting star on the margin of the book or something. But whenever there's something in that book which doesn't make sense, just make a note of that, because you can bring it here and then we can discuss it, and then you can get different views and get some real life experience being shared, and hopefully it can then make a bit more sense. And sometimes, as you say, very dry material, not easy to read, and there's not a lot of context in a lot of places. And often it's like that on purpose, because if they had to put huge amounts of detail in everything, then the book wouldn't be the way it is now. It'll be 5 times thicker, which would make it even worse. So there's pros and cons to that.
It's exciting a bit. A cartoon or something, like smiley face somewhere. This is more like a Bible.
Okay, then once you've read the chapter, next thing is to do the sample questions. There's those little case studies at the end of each chapter. There are the question and answer books like this. There's the online question databases. All of those have got a whole lot of questions, and you can set it up to give you questions just on the chapter that you've read. The idea is, as soon as you've read it, do a whole lot of those questions. You're going to get some right, you're going to get some wrong. Bring all the ones that you got wrong, and let's talk about those, because those are areas where you then don't quite understand exactly what it's all about. And if we discuss it, hopefully you can remember the discussion, and if that question or something similar comes up again, you'll then have a good chance of getting that answer right. Okay. Okay, that self-assessment, we'll have a look in a minute at that, but yeah, that can be quite challenging. It just gives you your marks per section. It doesn't actually give you what the right answers are, so at the end of it, you're not really much wiser. I think that's done intentionally, so that you can come back and do it later, and you haven't read all the answers, and then thought, okay, now I know this one, I know that one. You've actually got to go and read the book to find out what the answers for those, and then go back and do it. So they're not making it easy for you, but intentionally so that you can use it multiple times. I did it earlier, and I've got 4 answers wrong in that thing. I'll have to go back and figure out which 4 are wrong, because it doesn't tell you which the 4 are.
Good 46%.
So yeah, we'll try and figure out what they are, so at least we have a model answer for that. But yeah, we'll get there. Okay, we spoke about trying to start at 4:45. That didn't quite work out. We started closer to 5. Jonathan is still not here. I'm not sure if he's going to make it. We were kind of waiting for him as well to try and fit in around his travels. But I think let's just use the time. If it's 4:45, then we'll try and start more on time at 4:45. We're all here, so we know where the place is. That's great. What we also said we wanted to do is reassess a bit. Each week we can have a look at the schedule, see how we're doing. We had said that even though the first few chapters are shorter than the last chapters, we'd still do 2 weeks per chapter. If we decide that we can cover the chapter in a week, it leaves more time at the end for revision. But for now, we'll stick to the schedule as we have it. If anybody's got a better suggestion, we're always open to good ideas. Okay. And then also see in terms of time commitment, how long is it taking to get through what you need to get done. You are going to have to invest some time to get through the chapter, to get through the questions. The more questions you do, the better. If you don't get to the questions or get through the chapter, it's not going to result in a positive outcome when you get to the end of it. And then we can see how we go from there. Just to recap in terms of the provisional schedule, we're on the 17th of March, so that's chapter 1, part 1. The idea was try and read the whole of that chapter in the first week. In the second week, do a whole lot more questions on that. So in that second week, we can spend most of the time discussing questions or relating that back to the chapter of where the particular items arise from that you might be getting wrong or battling with. So if you haven't read it, you've got time to catch up, but don't just catch up in terms of reading. Make sure you do those questions, because that's really where the value comes from. And leaving it all to the end is not really going to help you. The online database has got over 1,200 questions in it. That's a lot of questions to try and get through in a short space of time if you think you're going to do that in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Much better to have started earlier on that. Okay. We have allocated some time towards the end for revision, for doing sample exam, and then the last kind of discussion around exam techniques and whatever else might be worrying you in that last week before the exam. So we won't be covering too much material in that last week. It's really to just polish up those rough edges if there's anything left that we need to deal with. Okay, so the self-assessment, 50 questions, should take an hour. Okay, or it should in fact take less than an hour, but yeah. So we heard some comments and feedback in terms of how it went. The marks coming out of there are not that good, which is fine. It's early on. Better to have an honest view of where things are at, rather than have a false sense of security, thinking that you know all the material and that it's all going to go well without needing to study for it. But yeah, are there any more comments in terms of how long it took, or just the style of questions, which sections perhaps people battled with?
One of the questions they ask you, they say, what is the most appropriate technique? What is the worst way of doing it? And then you look at the answers and you're like, but all of them are bad. All of them are not the way you're supposed to do it. Which one from the four is the worst one? Now, I think that is where I struggle a lot in deciphering. So maybe I can kick one out because that's not so important. But there's still three, and I can't decide which one is more important than the other. How do I know? How do I decipher that this is more important? Then I start applying these theories to it. But it's theories and assumptions, and you don't know what you're trying to think. What is the person who asked the question? What are they thinking? Because that you try and get from university days. You try and understand.
You maybe have a chance this time.
Okay. Any other? Zubair? Your results were interesting when I looked at the scores per chapter.
Yeah.
Because they were quite varied.
It's depressing though, I must say.
Well,
To get like 4 out of 7.
yeah. But, sometimes the margin between the one question and the other, margin between those answers is very small. So 4 out of 7 doesn't mean you only knew the answers.
So then I'll never know then.
But in the end, they will give you
Whether
a
they're talking
percentage
about
grade.
They just give you the percentage,
Per
but you won't even
section.
know where you went wrong, because when I went back, I did very badly.
You did worse the second time.
Yes. Because I thought, what, let me
Because
go
you think
back
you got
to my
something wrong, but it's
content.
not there. You're changing the right one to the wrong one.
I think that's what I did.
When you
That self-assessment is not intended for you to do it and then go back and try and do it again and see if you get a better mark. Because they're not telling you which questions you get wrong, why you went wrong, so that you can actually learn, understand, do it again, and get
Well, I
better.
misinterpreted the question, but I changed on the domains. But I'm still doing very badly on domain 4 and domain 5. Domain 1 and 2, I was like,
Yeah. So similar to where Zubair is, which is not surprising. You're in an audit environment, you understand the audit process, so you should do okay in those sections. The 4 and 5 is the more technical ones, probably in the areas where you don't get to get involved in audits of that nature, and you don't have any technical training in that area. So it's not a surprise that you don't do so well in that. So that means we need to make sure that by the time we get to those chapters in the study cycle, you're well versed in terms of making sure you get through the chapter in a week. And even if it's a long chapter, try and get through the whole of the chapter in the first week. If you get ahead of schedule, that's fine. Start getting ahead of where we are, because then you've got more time for those ones. We're going to be spending a disproportionate amount of time on the early chapters, but it'll get us into the swing of things. And if we need to spend longer on some of those later chapters and cut down on some of the revision time, that's okay. People can move around depending on and adjust their pace depending on how they're feeling with the material.
I think once everyone's done with this, if everyone feels, okay, it won't.
That's what it's intended to do. It's intended to show at the end of the studies that you have the skills, the knowledge in order to be able to perform these functions. And that's what then gets you qualified as a CISA. And if you don't have that knowledge, and you can't do those activities, then the intention is that you don't pass and you don't become a CISA. Okay. So if we have a look then at chapter 1, in each chapter we have tasks and we've got knowledge, and the knowledge enables us to perform those tasks. So if you look in the little diagram there, you see we've got a number of tasks and then we've got these knowledge areas, and it's not a one-to-one. Task 1.2, plan specific audits to determine whether information systems are protected, controlled, and to provide value to the organization. So again, I'm talking about planning of specific audits. So task 1 was about this overall strategy of how you're going to do IT audits. And that's almost your audit plan for the year, or on a 3-year kind of cycle. Task 2 now is the specific audits within that audit cycle and within that audit plan. Okay? And that's now around specific systems. So are the systems protected? Are the systems controlled? And do they provide value to the organization? Now, if there's a system that doesn't really provide value to the organization, normally you wouldn't be auditing it to ensure appropriate actions have been taken by management in a timely manner. So don't just do the audit and leave it and then come back a year later in the next audit cycle and say, bad management, you haven't done anything. But through the period, do follow-ups to ensure that they've done it and then report appropriately and escalate if nothing's happening. Now, a lot of these are much easier to do in an internal audit environment where you add kind of on-site permanently looking at these things. External audit, not always so easy to do those things. But often what happens is external auditors will hand those over to internal auditors to follow up on their behalf. And then when they come back, internal auditors at least have done those follow-ups and you can then get some kind of response out of that. But that entire thing is the audit cycle. And that's what's covered in Chapter 1. If you go back to the previous one, there were a couple of points where it said, do this in terms of the standards, do that in terms of the standards. Okay? In order to successfully do that, you've got to know what those standards are or have access to them. Okay? So you don't necessarily need to learn these things all off by heart, but if you're working in this area, you should at least have a copy of them as PDFs on your laptop or have them in a file or somewhere, so that when you're doing a particular function, you think, oh, I don't really know how to do this, you go and look it up. So you're not making something up. So in that way, if I do an audit and you do an audit, we both do it in terms of the same standards, we're doing more or less the same stuff. So if you're going to do audits in terms of an audit plan, in terms of the audit cycle, you've got to make sure that those audits happen when they're supposed to happen, they take the right amount of time, and that you can get through them and get them done. Otherwise, you're never going to get your audit plan complete in terms of the cycle. So that's where that project management techniques comes into it. Okay? So as an auditor, it's not just know the standards or know some technical stuff. There's a lot of different skills that you need in order to make these things happen. 1.5, knowledge of fundamental business processes. So there's examples there of the different kinds of business processes based on the US. Sarbanes-Oxley means nothing because they don't have to do it. Okay? We've got POPI coming into effect. You're going to need to know what that is and what it means, because when you audit a section, if you don't raise the risks around POPI, people are going to look at you like, well, why didn't you tell me this? You're the auditor, you're supposed to know these things. Okay. 1.7, knowledge of evidence collection techniques. So the different kinds there: observation, inquiry, inspection, interview, data analysis, fraud investigation. So those are all different techniques we can use to gather, protect, and preserve the audit evidence. Okay. And you'll see when you start going through the detail in the book that talks about quality of evidence. Not all evidence is equal. If I ask somebody something and they give me an answer, well, they could tell me anything. It's not really very good evidence. It's better than nothing, but it's not good. Whereas if you go and look on a system and you can see the actual configuration and you take a screenshot of that, that's much better. If you can analyze data and have a look for patterns and see what's going on in the data or log files, that's much better evidence than just have somebody tell you something. Okay. 1.8, knowledge of different sampling techniques and methodologies. Okay. Pretty. Sorry?
4 or 5, 2 for a year.
Not the schedule.
We do 2 for a year. I mean 2 for a month. We do 4 or 5 for a month.
The PowerPoint slide that you gave me said it's 1 for a year.
Yeah, 1 per month. Yeah.
And it's 1 if it's quarterly,
Yeah.
and it's 2 if it's monthly.
Yeah. I think 1 if it's a year.
Yeah, 1 if it's a year,
2 if it's monthly.
2 if it's monthly. And then if it's
Weekly,
weekly,
it's 5.
then it's 5. And then if it's yearly, it's 15. And then if it's multiple times per day, then that's, we need quality in what we're doing. We have to have quality assurance processes in place, continuous improvement. So all of these then are the different areas of knowledge that we need to have in order to be able to execute these audits. And that's what Chapter 1 covers in all its different areas, are those 10 things. Okay. I need to grab some water, otherwise I'm going to lose my voice. But there's the different sections of Chapter 1. Anybody else wants anything?
Not so else will be starting now. Right now, only 6 months. 6 months complete, I think. You should have a brand new safe. Next one.
Latin. Framework, then they've got guidelines, and they've got different tools and techniques and standards and more guidelines, and then they talk about the relationship between all these things. You kind of need to go and read all that. To try and explain that all without you having read it and been through and see where the challenges are is kind of difficult to do. It's unfortunately one of those things you'll just have to go and have a look at it. Okay. So next week we can come back to that if there's any challenges there. 1.4 risk analysis. So there's not a lot on risk analysis. It's only a page and a half there. And I guess it's really more of an introduction to risk analysis. They talk of it being part of the audit planning, that you've got to identify the risks and vulnerability. They talk about general controls and IS controls, so all the different kinds of controls. Okay? And those things all build one on the other. If you look within a business process, you're going to have certain manual controls and system controls. Okay? But if those manual and system controls in some way or another rely on an IT system, beneath that you're going to have operating systems and databases and an Active Directory and all those things. If you can compromise that lower level of control, all top controls are meaningless, unless they're complete end-to-end controls. So there might be controls here which look as though they should be effective controls, but if you don't go and test the general controls, the compliance aspect of that is failed. Okay? Substantive is now not looking at it from a compliance perspective like that, but it's actually looking to see what's actually happened on the ground. Okay? So in a compliance audit, what you might do, and I'm kind of talking quickly off the top of my head, so let's hope I don't get it too wrong. But you might go and say, well, let's go and look at the system, and let's go from the system, and let's look at every new user that's on the system. And let's now go and look, are these people actually employed by the organization? Are they actually in the HR system? Yes. Are they actually in the function and the area where they've now been added? So if it says this guy's been given rights to the HR folder, is he actually in HR? Yes, he is. What does his job description say he should be doing? What rights has he been given? So he's been given that. That's now more substantive. And you'd have to go and do that pretty much every one of those things. Okay? Sampling works when you believe you've got a control environment in place that's working. So we say, okay, we want to know that these guys are doing what they should be doing. So we do a sample. We test 1 out of every 10, or we test 1 a month, or whatever it might be, according to our sampling methodology. But when you're in the substantive space, we can't really do that because the controls are not working. There might be a different guy doing it every month, or there's just absolutely no control. So then you have to test a much, much higher sample, or test all of them. The financial audit guys would like to give you much more detail around that because they've got all their sampling tools. And you want to go into your sampling tool and you'll say, okay, I've got an effective control environment or ineffective. And as soon as you say ineffective, the sample sizes go up much, much bigger because now you're moving from compliance type sampling to now saying, okay, we actually now need to do estimative sampling and discovery sampling and all those other variables. So there were IT controls in the framework, there were procurement controls in HR and finance, and everybody had their controls within the control framework. And that was then split up in the terms of a hierarchy. Okay? So if you look at something like audit strategy, or it's not audit strategy, IT strategy. Okay? So you have one IT strategy for transport group. So IT strategy belongs at the CIO group, CIO type level. IT strategy then has IT implementation plans that need to be implemented across different business units. So that would go down to the next level. Each of the divisional CIOs would then be responsible for that plan. Okay? And it would go right down to a level of saying, on a particular system, you need password controls in accordance with the organization's password policies. That would go right down to a system level. So whereas you would have one instance of control which says IT strategy, you might have 500 instances of the control that says password standards for this particular business application. Okay? And then you allocate those different instances out to different people across the different hierarchies. And then the system is configured to say, okay, this strategy control, how often does that need to be implemented? Well, once a year. So once a year, an email would go to the CIO saying, this control around strategy, have you done this thing that you should do here? And they would have to say, yes, I've done it, and give it a ranking in terms of effectiveness between 1 and 5. So it's working very badly or it's working very well, and give some explanation. Okay? And those responses would come back and get collated into almost a heat map that would then go through to the CFO and the internal control function. So they would then look at all of these answers coming back. So one of the questions that used to come to me as head of information security was, how effective is the organization's protection of personal information? There was nothing in place. I always used to give it a 0 and just say, there's nothing in place. And then somebody would come to me and say, well, what are you doing about it? Well, there's no budget, it's not actually in my area. So somebody else needs to take care of it. But the reality is there's nothing. Benefits, disadvantages, the auditor's role, technology drivers, and then traditional versus CSA approach. Technology is quite important because the admin overhead about putting in a CSA in an organization can be extremely high if you don't have technology to drive it. Okay? You've got the technology there, you can automate all these emails that go out, people can go online, fill in their answers, it'll collate it back again, it'll send reminders if they don't do it on time, it'll tell you who's bad at filling it in, who's good, and then give you all those reports out of it. You've got to do all that manually. It takes an audit amount of work to actually get that done. But you look at things like SAP GRC, you've actually got this kind of functionality built into tools like SAP GRC. So there's a lot of different tools in the market now which allow these things to happen very effectively. Okay. 1.8 talks about the evolving IS audit approach. So they talk about things like integrated auditing, continuous auditing, different ways of doing auditing. Then probably more focused on the internal audit type functions rather than external audits. But there's different ways one can do that. And then 1.9 is just the case study with the answers included in 1.10. So I don't know if anybody got as far as 1.9 and had a look at the case study and then tried to see what the answers in that were. Okay. Does anybody have any issues coming out of what they've read? So you raised your one around what do you do with all those extra readings? So yeah, we've kind of answered that for now.
It's going to get was. You'll see it starts adding more and more and more information.
Absolutely, it will. Yeah. And if you read online and like the study support groups and that, they say, go and read the different ISACA journal articles and go and read all these other things. It's not a bad idea if you've got time to go and read some of those things. I think they're trying to test your general knowledge of what's happening in the world, in the IT world, in the risk space, in the audit space. So that kind of general knowledge and general reading could help you. It could be the difference between getting 90% and 95%. You know, it's highly unlikely that to be the difference between a pass and a fail. What's in this book is more likely going to be the difference between a pass and fail. That's kind of the added extra on the top if you can get to it.
I think, Justin, the terminology in some of these things, yeah, for us, I don't know if you guys feel the same now, but within my type of bracket, the terminology, some of the questions in the self-assessment, I don't even know what they're asking. So I'm rather leave it blank because it's going to skew the score in the end.
Well, don't leave it blank. Okay?
Do they do negative marking?
No, there's no negative marking.
So you have an answer.
So-
50-50 chance.
So leaving it blank is giving away
You can
0.25 of a
guess
mark.
if you really.
You must guess.
Yeah.
Never leave something blank.
Isn't
Statistical sampling.
So yeah, so never leave something blank. And in fact, you know, you can take each question and you can start analyze the question, break it down, analyze the answers, break it down. And normally there's one or two of the answers that you can actually just cross out immediately. Okay. So now you're down to not a 25% chance of getting a mark, you're down to, let's say, 33 or 50% chance. Yeah. And a couple of those can make the difference between getting through or not getting through. So hopefully next week we can spend a bit more time discussing those areas which are challenging and those questions which you're struggling with. Because the next slide's talking about the questions and answers and what it is that you weren't getting right there. Did anybody get to any of the questions?
These are the best.
Yeah.
The ones for them. I did do it last year.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's not, it doesn't even link to chapter and then go through it in 5 minutes and then when you finish it, you'll be like,
Yeah.
no, I don't know what I just
working,
said.
man. You can't know.
Yeah, it's
Juggling
difficult.
between-
I was reading the bold writing and I decided not to read that part for today.
So what you can do is read the chapter, then go and do 50 questions or 100 questions based on the chapter. Then when you do those questions, either from that book or online, when you get something wrong, it tells you and explains to
How
you,
much you don't
this is
know.
this one, this is that one, this is why this one's not right.
I
flag-
think you learn so much with questions, especially.
Flag it there, flag it in the book, and once you've done those 50 or 100 questions, go back and read the chapter again. And then it helps the framework and helps a little bit around all that.
Because after you go through the questions, you realize what you don't know. So when you're going through the chapter again, you see, oh, this is what I missed when I read it the first time.
He said sometimes you see something, for example, you might have seen this utility software, but you just browse it because you never know the importance of it whatsoever. You saw it, yes. But when they start, applying it to the question, then you go back again to understand.
At least
what
you'll
is
have
it for,
someone
where
that
to
failed
apply
an
it.
exam here, so I know I'm talking from experience. That's the honest truth. I know you was writing CISA that day when I wrote. With Tishi? You wrote,
Wait, last year, December?
yeah, December.
I wrote CISA.
And you wrote CISA. Okay,
Yeah.
I was also writing CISA that day. And the paper wasn't that difficult, honestly. If I went through the questions, I would have passed it differently. But it is true. Because I never
It's a
had
different
time.
English
what
altogether.
was
It's not, honestly, if you look at a case study like this, the
Yeah.
question is not that long. In the question paper, you won't get a big case study.
You get like this.
Yeah, like that. It's not even that
All
hectic.
this in it's nothing.
Okay, so if you come back to this example here, Okay, so they're talking the most appropriate type of CAT tool to test system configuration. So start with the generalized audit software. Now, generalized audit software, if you go and read the definition, talks about software that has capability to read and access data from different platforms. And so they're talking about tools like ACL and IDEA and those kinds of things. Okay. Now that's more to do analysis of data. It's not going to tell you about system configuration. So clearly that one can't be the answer. Okay? But you have to know what gas is in order to know that that's not the answer. Okay? Next one is test data. Okay? When do you use test data? To test? It could be data migration, but you're normally using test data to test how a system reacts to certain data. So if I put in this is an account number and it's a 12-month account and the balance is 10,000 Rand, we know that the answer should be at this interest rate. It gives you that this is the amount of interest owing for the year. Okay? That's what test data does for you. So if somebody makes a whole lot of changes in the system, you take your test data, you run it through, you see do you get the same answer. If you do, great, the system is still working the way it should. If you don't, somebody's messed something up. Okay? So that's not going to help you to test system configuration. Okay? Next one down is utility software. Okay? Now utilities are built into all sorts of things. So Windows has utilities built in, Unix has utilities built in. Utilities are there just to make a system administrator's life easier. Okay? Utility is like a multi-purpose thing. You think of like a utility knife in the kitchen. You know, it's a knife that you can use to chop and dice and peel and slice, everything all in one. Okay? So utility software is software that can help you pull information out of the system. And configuration information is one of those things. Okay? So that could be an answer. Okay? You look at an expert system. What is an expert system? Sorry? Huh? Here we go. Okay, an expert system is some kind of artificial intelligence type thing. So let's talk about. So let's say we want to diagnose an illness. Okay, an expert system could ask you a whole lot of questions. Does the patient have a temperature? Do they have this? Are they coughing? Right? And based on the answers you give, it's going to narrow it down and say, well, chances are they've got pneumonia or HIV. Okay, so that's what an expert system does for you. That's not going to help you in any way know about the configuration of a system. Okay? So simply by eliminating the ones which are obviously not the answer, we're actually only left with one answer that it could be. Okay? But you do need to know what those different things are. But even if you didn't know what a utility was, if you knew what the other three were, you could cross them out. But there's a fair amount of terminology type stuff that you're going to need to know. And the only way you're going to know that is by reading it in the chapter, by doing the questions, getting the questions wrong, reading the answers, doing it again, and then you'll get there.
And then another quick question, the one above that, if you look at A2,
okay.
This testing whenever you test program change management, you have to do completeness well. Report back to report, you can't do existence. Like for example, the answer I know is D and I got it right, but I've seen this somewhere else also. I think it was on the 50 in the self-assessment as well, about testing program change management. Is it always the code sample back to the logs?
Yeah.
Like should it not be not A, what I was thinking B. I think it was, yeah, I was assuming B or D. Oh, the B was the right answer, so that's completeness, yeah. So I was thinking, why not D? Which is the existence of
but if you look at it, okay. So B is saying you're checking from a program code.
Yeah.
Back to source documentation signed off by somebody to say it's an approved change. D is saying production code should be sampled, which is the same as B. Okay, and trace back to system produced logs. So what is that going to tell you? It's going to say this piece of code has changed and it got changed on this date. It's not going to tell you who changed it, why they changed it, whether it was authorized or not. So it's not going to tell you anything.
So the key thing here is who authorized the change more than whether the change happened or not.
The control behind it.
It's not whether the change happened or not. It's So you're using the source, or what do they call the production code, okay, to identify the changes that have happened. Now, for this change that has happened, because the change definitely has happened, you want to know, is all the necessary paperwork in place? Did it go through change advisory board? Were the users notified? And whatever the business process is and whatever the organization's controls are. Okay? And that's what you're getting by B, that you're not getting through any of the other answers. So yeah, I mean, they go on to explain here why you wouldn't start with the actual filled-in paperwork. Because if somebody neglects to fill in the paperwork, or they misfile it, or they throw it away, or they're doing an unauthorized change, there won't be any paperwork. So if you're starting at the paperwork, it proves nothing to you. It's also why you never let the client select your samples, really. You know, when you've kind of been in industry for a little while, you'll hear people talking about how they fooled the auditors. They know the system is broken and not working, but by guiding the auditor down a path where they can influence the sample, they can give you the paperwork for the ones that did follow the process, and they can then pass the audit, when perhaps they're only producing paperwork for one out of every 2 items. And inexperienced auditors are able to bully and fool down that path. Oh, you run a deadline. Okay, well, let me help you meet your deadline. No. No, you want to choose those ones. No, it's going to take too long like that. You'll never meet your deadline like that, you know? And it's difficult to then go back to your manager, to go back to the client management to say, hey, you know what, we're putting this entire audit on hold. We're pulling this entire audit team out. Your deadline is going to get blown. You go explain it to your audit committee. But your people are not coming to the party, and they're not allowing us to do our audits. Okay? It takes a very strong person to be able to do that. But sometimes that's what has to happen, because like I say, they have it as this kind of challenge to fool the auditors. And that happens across all audits everywhere. Oh, you want to know why this financial number went up? That's because of this and this. Kind of half an hour later, you realize a mistake was made, and that the number actually didn't go up, it went down. You go back to the same guy, and he'll give you an equally plausible excuse as to why it went down, not up. You're then going there, well, hang on now. What's going on? You know? You laughing, is it? It's not that uncommon. Okay, so if you have a look at case study question B2. Okay. So case study question B2 says, given that the application is accessed through the internet, how should the auditor determine whether to perform a detailed review of the firewall rules and VPN configuration settings? Okay. So they've got the system, there's some complexity involved, it's going through the internet, there's a VPN, there's firewalls, there's all sorts of stuff happening there. Okay. So they say, A, documented risk analysis. Okay, what did we say earlier when we were talking about risk? That you always start with analyzing the risk, and that then guides the rest of what you're doing. Okay, so immediately A is a very likely answer. Okay. B, availability of technical expertise. Well, just because we don't have the expertise to do the audit doesn't mean we can't do the audit, so we can just bypass it. We have to do it. So the availability is our problem. It doesn't really come into it here. Okay. C, approach used in previous audits. Just because they did it that way last year doesn't mean we should do it that way this year. One should look at it and understand it. Yeah. And then option D, IS auditing guidelines and best practices. Well, auditing guidelines and best practices should always come into it, but that's not going to be detailed enough to help you in this specific example. So given that we know that A is a most likely answer, and none of the other answers are really acceptable, without even knowing what the question is really asking us, in terms of the detail of those technical things, we know what the answer is. The answer is A. And that's the kind of exam technique that can help you get through some of these questions.
And hopefully, as we're going through the sessions, we will
You will learn and
interpret
understand
and
more and more and more of these things. So what is a VPN? It's a virtual private network, that's right. So when would you use a VPN?
You're going to connect remotely.
Okay, so you want to connect remotely. From where to where?
External.
Internet is a server.
External to the
So I'm hearing external to the server, I'm hearing external to
internal network.
the internal
Like
network.
how to
Like remote access and things like that.
Yeah, so the most common use of a VPN is that if you're on some kind of external network and there's an internal network, you would authenticate and then it would effectively place you on that internal network. Okay? And then when you're placed on that internal network, you can now access applications and stuff that only internal people can access. Okay? And it's reasonably secure in the sense that people won't see what's on that internal network until they've authenticated. When you put everything on web pages, people might not see like a front login page to the web page. The VPNs are more private in a way. You can still scan for them over the internet, but it's much harder to break into a VPN than it is into, say, a web application. Okay? And VPN can still be thick client. It doesn't have to be web-based. Once you're logged into there, you can do anything as if you're on that internal network. Okay? And then a firewall. Does everybody know what a firewall is? Well, it's a war around the castle where they've got all the hot oil that's on fire and burning, and they drop it onto the people trying to climb over the wall.
like that sometimes.
Yeah, they do.
What's not working? Images.
So what is a firewall then? Firewall is a device that sits between two networks. Okay? And it controls traffic flows between those networks and decides which traffic is allowed and which traffic is not allowed. And there's lots of different kinds of firewalls. You've got packet filtering firewalls and stateful inspection firewalls. And these days you've even got all these next generation firewalls that actually understand exactly what kind of traffic is going through there. And they can differentiate between somebody browsing the net and somebody going to Facebook. And they can decide you're not allowed to go to Facebook. So we'll allow port 80 through, which is your normal web traffic. But if it's Facebook, not going to allow it. Or we'll allow you to go to Facebook, but you can't post anything to Facebook. So you can read stuff, but if you're on a work computer, you can't actually post anything. So all the firewalls can do all these cool kind of things.
So one of the questions on the self-assessment, I think, was around that. How do you block something to that? So you use a firewall to block what you can view in an entity.
But firewalls aren't the only things that can block.
What else blocks? Like at EY, for example, you couldn't get into Gmail, for example.
Yeah. So maybe what we can do in one of the sessions later on is look at like network layout and the different kinds of network components and things like that. Because a firewall can be used to do that, but normally you have a proxy server. Okay? And a proxy server is normally more dedicated to, let's say, web traffic. So you get things like Blue Coat and Zscaler and all these proxy servers.
Do they test all this?
Protection of assets.
Yeah. So you will need to know what a proxy server
all
is.
types of firewalls and stuff like that.
They could ask you on those things.
You need to understand all of them.
You need to understand those things.
What's a trapdoor?
Trapdoor.
More like a dead man dog.
It is covered on chapter 5. All these things.
Firewall.
I think dead man dog.
Dead man
It's a
door,
dead
I've
man
heard
door.
of.
What's a dead man?
I know I came across
You know
it
that
when I
dead-
was studying.
the door.
Dead man dog.
Break it
It's
down.
like when I think you open the door and then someone, no, that's piggybacking.
No, dead man don't stop piggybacking, so you're on the right track
dead-
there.
When you close the door, then
And
it
then
can allow
someone
you
just
to.
comes in and pushes the door, so we need to make sure that the door is
So like at the
closed.
banks, you know at the
Like at
bank,
the bank,
when you walk into the bank and only one person can go through that. So you walk in, green light stops behind you, that's a dead man door.
But I
You
don't
have
think trapdoor.
to- Okay.
It's a never
Okay, I'll find the word.
So that's a dead man door.
So that stops, there's terminology for piggybacking
So you know you're gonna come
and
across
tailgating. And those kind of
piggybacking.
things. I want to get into a building, I don't have an access card, I just walk immediately behind you and you use your access card and we walk in together. And you're such a polite person, you even hold the door open for me. Okay? Dead man door stops that. Okay? So you'll find all these kind of terms and things come up. You almost need to start writing down, get a book, and start building this list of buzzwords that you need to know that you don't really understand. And then you can go through those and learn those at the end.
We need to go to the chapters to come and sit here so we can
You
discuss.
do need to, because then we can discuss stuff and we can
It
discuss
makes
your
more
issues
sense.
and things that you're battling with. Otherwise, you're going to hear things that other people are battling with, and you might think, oh, I know that, but they know what stuff that you don't know, and then you don't gain enough out of it.
They say you always learn something every day. I learned like 5 things. I'm coming for a week. Backing, dead man dog.
Remember, there's 200 questions in the exam, so you better hope that you remember at least those 200 things.
And those will definitely come out, I'm sure. Okay, and in the paper, when you get that, you're going to think of us.
Dead man, I started laughing.
The other thing that always comes up, okay, and it doesn't matter which paper, it's always in there somewhere, okay, is that in all of these things, the most important thing is protecting human life.
I saw a question similar to that too. Was it BCP or something?
And all those things, whether it's under risk assessment, under BCP, under the design of the gas system that's going into your server room,
And you will
protection
think
of human life
the most
comes
important
first.
thing is to recover
Sometimes you feel like the
systems
server's more important than humans.
to protect the human life.
The way they fireproof that room and all that.
And I think BCP
Raised flooring,
protects human
aircon.
So here in South Africa, where we get like 2,000 people every few months dying on the roads and car accidents and all that, we might not think human life is so important compared to, let's say, the whole server room that runs
Yeah.
the HR system for the whole country. But in the countries where these books and that are written, one person dying is, far more of a disaster than an entire server room of 5 people dying. So people aren't allowed to die, okay?
If someone's holding someone, they're one of your employees, and he's holding your server box here, and he says, I'm going to drop one.
So when you read a question, you think, I understand this question and I know the answer, and you start reading the answers, okay? And you get to one, let's say it's answer B, and you think, B's the one. Make sure you read C and D. Because if C or D talks about human life, okay, go back and reread the question and choose the human life answer.
What if they say your stuff is not backed up? Then there's no offside story. They're still
Then you say, I'm going to kill that guy. I'm going to hang out the window and end that human life. So if you've got to save your backup or save the human, you save the human.
We need information more than human. It's the other way around.
No, that's not going to get you, as true as it might be, you're not going to get that mark for that answer.
So at least when you're human, yeah.
Okay.
But can I ask you another question before we
Sure.
close up? I know it's late.
No,
This
no
IT
problem.
acquisition thing, why I fail so badly? How hard is it to buy a computer and look after it? Like I've been buying things my whole life and looking after those things my whole life.
This is not marketing.
It's a system development life cycle process.
But the question is,
Like,
okay,
isn't it like
your whole life,
That's the
have you been
organization
buying the
right
right
now.
stuff, okay, at the right price? And have you been looking after it? And have you understood the total cost of ownership? Okay. Or every week, have you got something breaking in the house and you're going back and you're thinking, damn, why did I buy the cheap one? I should have bought the one with the 5-year warranty that might still be working now. And why did I buy it from Hi-Fi Corporation? They never fix anything on time. If I got it from Macro, it would have been 3 weeks and then it was fixed. If I got it from Government Money or something, maybe a week and they would have got it fixed. Okay. Kalari, I don't know how good they are. Take a lot. If something breaks, they'll send a courier to your house and they'll fetch it and within a week it's sorted.
He knows.
Look at the time that you don't want to have problems.
So, all these things become important and it sounds simple. Okay? Even things like outsourcing. Outsourcing sounds so simple. Yeah, we'll get a service provider to do it. They'll come and do it all. Okay? And then you give all your good people and you give it to them. Now you've got to manage those buggers, but you don't have any people to manage it because all your good people have gone over there. So they get away with murder because they can do anything they like because nobody inside knows the fact that they're not doing what they should be doing. Okay? So all of those things are actually way more complicated than it actually seems at first. But as soon as you start digging down into it and discussing it and exploring it, you start to see that you don't know what you don't know, and then you know what you don't know, and then you know it.
That's the process. Now we mustn't fall at the exam date and we're still in the middle of what the 3 things you just mentioned. When we know what we don't know. We need to know.
You can't use the exam to discover that you know what you don't know.
That's the thing. That's basically what happens with people who fail.
Yeah.
They get past the phase where they don't know what they don't know. They know what they don't know, but they just stop there.
The good thing is that we still have time. We're sitting here, we've got a schedule, that we've got 2 weeks per chapter. We've still got next week to go through this chapter. We've then got 2 weeks for every other chapter, and we've got a couple of weeks to go through revision. So there's plenty of time. Just don't waste that time. Okay? Every week from now going forward, you need to be reading something of a chapter, and you need to be doing some questions and answering them around that chapter. And if you can keep doing that discipline, then you'll get there. Okay. So if we look at what you need to do for next week, if you haven't done the self-assessment, do it. Okay? Do yourself a favor, print out the list of questions with your answers. Okay? So once you've filled it in, it gives you a score, but it just gives you the score per section. It doesn't tell you what you got wrong. But there's a little button there that says go back to your questions. So go back to that and then print it to a PDF or something so you've got a record of what you answered. Okay? And then print that page, which is the summary page. So you've got that. And then when we've done all the sections, you come back to it, in 2 months' time, and you do the thing again, and hopefully your scores will have gone up. Okay? And then you can see which section now perhaps still needs a little bit of work. Okay? And then we can figure out what the model answer is for that as well, and see which questions you got wrong and talk about those as well.
So you've printed your one out already?
I've done it, but
because that means if you know you got 4 wrong, that can be kind of the model answer for now. You can figure out the 4.
I need to figure out the 4, yeah.
You can always go back and play with it again. So you know where you went wrong, just
But he's
try and
not,
answer those ones.
you know the sections you went wrong, but not that.
Yeah, you want to which account, which
Yeah,
number.
but so what you can do,
But he'll be able to identify which questions relates to which
yeah,
section.
I can work it out, because what you can do
We can't
is
do
that because you can push the market and then you can say go back. So you can start with question 1, you put your answer in,
Change it.
and then it should tell you that you've got 1 right or 1 wrong and
But it'll
49
take some
blanks.
time.
So it'll take a while. So I could capture like the first 10 and see how many are wrong and then go and change answers and do the next 10.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry? Read your book. Okay, so for next week then, revise or read or finish chapter 1 so that you've read through all that stuff. Okay? Terminology that you don't understand, make a list of those words. Okay? Look them up. You've got an index at the back here. You can go and find it. You can read it. But, okay? Reading the dictionary and reading the index is not going to help you.
Hey, might help
Okay.
me.
No, not really.
So make those notes of things you don't understand, whether it's just a pencil mark in the margin, whatever it is, something that can identify it next week when we sit here. You can page through your book and say this page, this page, this page. Can we please discuss? Okay. Do the sample questions. Do the sample questions that are in here. If you've got the question and answer guide, do it out of there. If you've got the online assessment, do that. All the ones that you get wrong, either take screenshots or print them or something so that you've got them, you can bring them with, and then we can talk through those. Okay. Even if you know, if you get it wrong and then you read their stuff and then you kind of go, oh, okay, no, I know why I got it wrong. Doesn't matter, still bring it along. Okay? We've all got different books that we're working off. Everybody can learn from those things. If somebody got it wrong, it can save you from getting it wrong at some point. Okay. And then similar kind of time, 4:45. We'll try and start at 4:45. Next week, it'll really be around what you bring. I'm not going to have a presentation to put together. We've been through what's in the chapter. So in terms of what you're battling with in the chapter and the questions, that's what we're going to focus on for the entire time. Okay? And then we can see how things are going in terms of the schedule, and then the following week is chapter 2. So hopefully we can get to a point then we'll there. Okay. And don't forget, there's still that online collection of videos you can go and watch for different elements of chapter 1. So it's in that slide deck. There's a link there. You go there, you sign up. It's free of charge, and they've broken it down. There's about 6 or 7 videos each, between 5 and 10 minutes long. So if there's one particular section that's a problem, go and watch the video for that section.
I've listened to the first one. I found it like it's not exactly in line with both exams. It's more of, I think it doesn't help much if you haven't grasped the content, if you haven't gone through the chapter itself. I think it's there is a highlight or is a high level of seeing that you actually understand the chapter as opposed to avoiding the book altogether.
You can't avoid the book. You're going to have to
It's
read
very
what's here.
highlight.
So read first and then watch.
Yes. It helps you to see that this is important. Then it starts making sense. Because what I did, I went and listened to it, and then I went to the book. God, I fell asleep so many times.
Yeah.
Because he explained like task, knowledge segment, task. I mean, a very boring stuff if you haven't gone through it. Nothing makes sense. You just have to go through the content and then.
Yeah. So use that as revision rather than anything else. But you cannot get away from the fact that by the time you read the exam or get to the exam, you need to have done
How long
everything
is
that's
one?
in the book.
No, it's like 10 minutes, 5 minutes.
Maybe next week after we're done, we should just watch it and then as a summary, as you say, revision.
The problem is that
It will eat how
if
much time
you
though?
add up those times for each of
It's not
those,
10 minutes for the whole
it's not 10
class.
minutes for a
Oh,
chapter. So if you come back
That's
to
not right.
like these things, it'll be like 10 minutes on knowledge statements, then it'll be 10 minutes on
Yeah.
Okay, no,
1.2 and 10 on
rather than
1.3.
I thought it's just
Unless
like a
it's
10
a section is really bad.
Yeah.
Which again, if we identify a section like that, then
Yeah.
absolutely, we can put the video up, we can discuss what they're talking about.
Well, sign up now and then when you finish your questions and you finish studying,
Yeah.
go to it and see if you're in line or not.
Okay. Cool, so that's pretty much it then.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Cool.
Do we have, I don't think we have everyone's email it. Are you going to email the slides, Justin? What's the plan going forward? We're just going to email it.
You were supposed to email it out. I
So
sent it
far-
to you and you didn't mail it out.
I don't have, yeah, I
we
think
must
I've
share
got,
our
I've got
email
now
address because we can
Melissa,
actually
I've
share
got
some ideas
Shane,
online.
right?
You